Jake was just an ordinary guy, at least that's what he thought. A normal day walking home from work turned into something completely different. He was tired after a long shift at the local bar, his mind foggy with exhaustion, and his feet dragging along the empty street. The moon hung low in the sky, casting shadows that seemed to move in the darkness. The city was quiet, almost too quiet. It wasn't a comforting silence. It felt like something was waiting to happen. As Jake turned the corner, he saw something strange. A small figure hunched over, stumbling down the alley just ahead. At first, he thought it was a lost child, maybe one of the local kids playing hide-and-seek. But the closer he got, the more he realized it wasn't a kid at all. The figure looked wrong. It was too small, too fragile. The creature had pale blue skin that shimmered faintly under the dim streetlight. Its head was large, almost too big for its tiny body. A pair of wide black eyes stared at him, filled with fear. And then he saw the blood. It was dripping from its side, soaking into the street as it struggled to move. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Hey," he called out, his voice rough from the cold night air. "Are you okay?" The creature stopped. It turned its head slowly, and for a moment Jake thought it might fall. Then with a small gasp it collapsed to the ground, too weak to stand. His heart raced. Without thinking, Jake rushed to the creature's side. He kneeled down, ignoring the panic rising in his chest. "What happened to you? Who did this?" It didn't respond at first, but when Jake touched its shoulder, the creature's body shuddered as if it were trying to speak but couldn't. Blood was seeping out from several deep wounds on its side, and Jake could see its skin was bruised in several places. Without a second thought, Jake knew he had to help. He scooped the small creature into his arms and started running toward the nearest hospital. It was only a few blocks away, but as he sprinted through the empty streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but then the sound grew louder. The shadows around him seemed to stretch and twist as if they were moving. His breath came out in short, sharp gasps, and his eyes darted around, trying to find where the danger was coming from. Jake's pulse quickened. He turned around, but there was nothing, just the darkness. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw them. 3 figures cloaked in black standing in the shadows at the end of the alley. They didn't move, but Jake could feel their eyes on him. Something about them felt off. He didn't know who they were, but he didn't need to. The way they stood there watching made his blood run cold. "Hey!" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. "What do you want?" One of the figures stepped forward. "Put it down!" a deep voice commanded, sending a chill down Jake's spine. Jake looked down at the creature in his arms. It was still alive, barely breathing, but he wasn't about to let it go. "No, this thing needs help." The figure stepped closer, and Jake could now see the faint glint of a blade in the man's hand. His grip tightened around the alien child as his heart raced. There was no way he could outrun them. No way he could fight them off. "I said put it down," the man repeated, this time with a growl. Jake's mind raced. He didn't know who these people were, but they didn't look like anyone he had seen before. They were dangerous, he could tell that just by looking at them. But what choice did he have? Without warning, the man lunged. Jake tried to move, but it was too late. The first stab hit him in the side, and the pain shot through his body like fire. He gasped. But before he could react, the second stab came, and then a third. The pain was unbearable, but he couldn't let go of the child, not now. He had to protect it. More stabs followed, each one sinking deeper into his flesh until he felt himself growing weaker. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, blood spilling from his wounds. Through his blurred vision, he saw the alien child's eyes flicker open one last time. She made a small, soft sound, almost like a cry, and then everything went black. Jake's world faded away as the cold concrete pressed against his cheek. The last thing he felt before he lost consciousness was the weight of the child in his arms. Jake's world slowly came back into focus, but it wasn't the familiar view of the dark alley he expected. His vision blurred and cleared in waves like a fog lifting from a forgotten memory. He felt an overwhelming heat around him, a warmth he wasn't used to, especially in the cool night air. The air smelled strange, like metal and something he couldn't quite place. He groaned softly, his head pounding as he tried to move. The sharp pain in his side made him wince, but there was something different this time. It wasn't the same as the stab wounds he'd received. This was the pain of healing, a slow, steady warmth that spread through his body like a gentle pulse. Jake opened his eyes fully now. His surroundings were unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls around him were sleek and smooth, made of a material that looked like polished silver. The room was softly lit by a light that seemed to come from nowhere, casting a dim, ethereal glow. It was quiet, almost unnervingly so. His breath was the only sound in the space. What is this? Jake muttered to himself, his voice rough, as if he hadn't spoken in days. His hands instinctively reached for his side, where the pain had been, but when he touched his body, it was covered in a soft, thin layer of bandages. His wounds were gone, completely healed. It didn't make sense. He had been stabbed 8 times, and now there was nothing but smooth skin. Panic began to rise in his chest. Where am I? He tried to sit up but found his legs unsteady. He was in some sort of medical bed and his body felt strange, too light, almost weightless. Was he dreaming? No. This felt too real. Suddenly, the door at the far end of the room slid open without a sound and in walked a tall figure, a being unlike any person Jake had ever seen. The creature had a smooth, pale face, its skin glistening with a faint, iridescent glow. Its eyes were large, black, and full of intelligence, like they could see right through him. Jake's heart raced. What is that thing? His first instinct was to jump up and run, but his body felt too weak to move. The figure stopped just a few feet from him, its gaze calm but intense. It didn't speak right away, but Jake could feel the presence of something ancient and powerful radiating from it. Where am I? Jake croaked, his throat dry, voice barely a whisper. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost as if considering the question. Then, in a voice that was both soothing and unnerving at the same time, it replied, "You are in the sanctuary." "You are safe here," Jake blinked, confused. "Sanctuary? What's going on? Who are you?" The being didn't answer right away. Instead, it stepped forward and raised a hand which glowed faintly with a soft light. Jake flinched, but the creature's touch was gentle as it placed its hand on his forehead. Jake felt a rush of memories flood back into his mind. Scattered images, fragments of a battle, the alien child in his arms, the dark figures who had attacked him. The stabs, the blood, it all came back in an instant. "You protected her," the being said softly, its voice echoing in his mind. "You saved the child." The mention of the child jolted Jake awake fully. "What happened to her? Is she okay?" The creature's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in its eyes that told Jake he wasn't going to like the answer. "The child is gone," it said, "but not in the way you fear." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He struggled to sit up more, his eyes scanning the room. "Where is she? Who took her? Why am I here?" "You are here because you have been chosen," the creature responded, its voice calm and unwavering. "The child's people. They would have taken you for the wounds you've suffered. You should have died. But you did not." Jake's confusion deepened. "Chosen for what? I don't even know who or what you are." "I'm just a guy who tried to save someone." The creature studied him silently for a moment before speaking again. "You are more than just a man. You have a bond with her now. The child's blood is part of you. She marked you with something powerful." Jake frowned, trying to piece together the strange words. "What are you talking about? How do I have her blood? I barely touched her. Not physically, but she gave you something far more precious when she entrusted her life to you. The mark of her kind is now a part of you." Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. His thoughts were jumbled. None of this made sense. He was just a bartender. He didn't ask for any of this. Why was he suddenly in the middle of an alien conflict? Before he could voice more questions, the door slid open again. This time, 2 more figures entered, both of them towering with armor that gleamed in the soft light. They stood like statues, their expressions unreadable. The first creature turned toward them. "Take him. He must be prepared for what comes next." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. Prepared for what? "What are you going to do to me?" But no one answered. Instead, the armored soldiers advanced, and Jake's body tensed in fear. Whatever was happening to him, he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer a simple human. Jake's mind raced as the armored soldiers stepped into the room, their heavy footsteps echoing against the smooth metallic floor. They moved with precision, their presence commanding the air, leaving Jake feeling like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. He could feel the weight of their gazes, their eyes hidden beneath dark, reflective visors. These were not ordinary beings. There was something unnervingly powerful about them, He instinctively backed away, the bed creaking beneath him. The soldiers didn't flinch. They didn't even acknowledge his movement. It was as if they were above him, as if his actions didn't matter at all. They weren't here to talk. They weren't here to negotiate. The first soldier, the one closest to Jake, was massive, easily twice Jake's size, with thick black armor that looked almost organic, as if it had fused with the soldier's skin. His face, covered by the dark visor, gave no hint of emotion, no expression of warmth or threat. It was as if he were a machine. The other two soldiers stood a few steps behind, keeping their distance but watching every move Jake made. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the walls and the soft click of their boots. Jake's heart thudded in his chest as he struggled to make sense of everything. He had barely woken up in this strange place, and now these things were standing before him. "Who are you?" Jake finally managed to ask, his voice low and shaky. The soldier nearest to him shifted slightly, tilting his head as if considering Jake's words. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke in a voice that was deep and calm, though carrying an undeniable authority. "We are the Cathar, the elite soldiers of the Orlith Empire," the soldier said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "And you, human, are an anomaly." Jake frowned, trying to process the information. "The what empire? And what do you mean by anomaly?" The soldier didn't respond right away, but instead stepped forward, raising his hand. Jake tensed, his instincts telling him to run, but he couldn't move. His legs felt like they were made of stone. The soldier's hand hovered just inches from Jake's chest, and then, with a sudden motion, he pressed something into Jake's skin. A sharp sting shot through Jake's chest, and for a moment he thought he was being stabbed again. But this time there was no pain, just a strange energy that flowed into him like electricity running through his veins. His breath hitched as he felt something inside him shift. The soldier pulled his hand away, and the sensation faded, leaving Jake feeling different. Not in a painful way, but in a strange, unsettling way. "What did you just do to me?" Jake demanded, his voice tight with fear. He could feel his heart racing faster now. "You've been marked," the soldier answered, his tone unfeeling. "You are no longer just a human. You are bound to her." "Her?" Jake repeated, his mind struggling to catch up. "Who, the alien child?" The soldier nodded, his movements precise. "Yes, the child you protected. She marked you with a symbol of her kind, a symbol of protection and loyalty, but you are also marked by something far more dangerous now." Jake's mind spun as he tried to make sense of this. A symbol of protection, loyalty? None of this was making sense. He wasn't some hero. He was just a guy who stumbled across an alien in trouble. Yet here he was, marked by an alien child's blood, tied to an alien race that apparently ruled an empire. Before Jake could ask anything more, the second soldier, the one at the back of the room, spoke for the first time. His voice was colder, sharper. "The criminal faction you encountered, they know who you are now. They will stop at nothing to reclaim what you carry." Jake's stomach sank at the mention of the criminal faction. He remembered the dark figures who had attacked him, the cold, ruthless eyes of the men who had tried to kill him for the child. He had barely survived their first attack, and now he was being told that they would come after him again, and worse. They knew exactly where he was. The first soldier stepped forward, raising a gloved hand to the side as if giving a signal. The walls of the room shimmered for a moment, and suddenly, the entire space seemed to transform. It wasn't just a medical chamber anymore, it was a command center, filled with holographic displays and alien technology that made Jake's head spin. "What is all this?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is our fleet," the soldier said, gesturing to the glowing images in the air. "The Orlith Empire's military presence. You are now part of this conflict." Jake's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean, part of this conflict?" "I'm just a guy. I'm not part of any empire's military." The soldier's expression remained unreadable. "You may not have chosen this path, but it chose you. The blood bond you share with the child is deeper than you understand. You've been marked as her protector, and now you must fight to survive." Jake felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. He was a bartender. He had no training, no skills for combat. And now he was being dragged into a galactic war, all because he tried to save an alien child. "Why me?" Jake asked, his voice almost desperate. "I'm nobody. I don't know anything about fighting, about war, about aliens." The soldier finally moved closer, his dark visor locking onto Jake's eyes. "Because you've proven yourself worthy. The enemy knows your face now, and they will come. But you are not alone. We will train you. We will make you strong. Jake's stomach twisted at the thought of fighting an enemy he couldn't even see, a war he didn't understand. But the look in the soldier's eyes, there was no choice. The game had already begun. He was in it now, whether he liked it or not. The soldier turned and nodded to the other two Cathar soldiers. Prepare him. We leave at dawn. Jake's mind buzzed with confusion and fear. He had barely understood what had happened to him. And now the soldiers were preparing him for something even more dangerous. As they led him through the facility, the walls pulsed with an eerie glow. The strange organic hum of the place seemed to echo in his bones, and the more he walked, the more out of place he felt. He was just a human, a normal guy from Earth, and now he was being dragged into an alien conflict that he didn't understand. He couldn't help but glance at the soldiers as they walked beside him, their armor gleaming with an almost unnatural sheen. The first soldier, the one who had spoken to him the most, stayed close. His silent presence an overwhelming reminder of just how little control Jake had over what was happening. They arrived at a room far different from the sterile medical chamber where he had woken up. This one was vast, with a high ceiling and a large holographic display in the center. There were maps, charts, and strange alien symbols floating in midair. It was a command center of some sort, but Jake couldn't make sense of anything. His head throbbed, his thoughts still jumbled, as if they were pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The first soldier motioned for Jake to stand at the center of the room. "This is where you will begin your training," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Jake opened his mouth to protest, but the words stuck in his throat. What could he say? He had no choice. He could barely process what had happened in the past few hours, let alone face whatever lay ahead. As Jake stood in the middle of the room, the hologram shifted, and a new figure appeared before him. It was the alien child, the one he had risked everything to save. But something was different about her now. Her once small, fragile form had grown, and she was surrounded by a soft, glowing light. Her eyes, still large and black, seemed to pierce through Jake, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of recognition. "Her name is Kaylee," the soldier spoke again, breaking the silence. Jake turned to look at him. "Kaylee?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The soldier nodded. "She is not just any child. She is of the Orlith royal bloodline. Her people are one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy." Jake's mind reeled. A royal? The alien child he had saved wasn't just any creature. She was from a bloodline that held power beyond anything he could imagine. But why had she been in that alley alone and bleeding? She was being hunted, the soldier continued, his voice colder now. Her bloodline is sought after by those who wish to control the power her people hold. The faction you encountered was one of them. Jake's stomach dropped. Hunted. The attackers weren't just criminals. They had been after the child's power. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had thought he was just helping a wounded being. But now he understood that he had gotten involved in something far bigger than he could have imagined. "Why did they want her?" Jake asked, his voice strained with the weight of the truth. The soldier paused before answering, his gaze unwavering.
"Kaylee is a key to unlocking the most powerful forces in the galaxy."
Her people, her royal family, possess abilities that could change the fate of entire star systems. But the faction that attacked you, they are mercenaries. They want to use her powers for themselves. If they succeed, they could destroy entire civilizations. Jake shook his head in disbelief. "But why me? I'm just a guy. Why am I involved in this?" The soldier took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "Because you have been marked by her. The moment you protected her, you bonded with her. That bond is now a part of you, and you, Jake, are the key to ensuring her safety." Jake's mind swam with questions. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier or a warrior. He was just a regular person thrown into this chaotic mess. How could he protect anyone, let alone a royal alien child? The soldier must have sensed Jake's disbelief because his voice softened just slightly. "You've already proven that you can protect her. You kept her alive when others would have let her die. That's why we've chosen you." Jake's heart thudded in his chest. Chosen? Chosen for what? To be a part of this intergalactic war? It didn't seem possible. He was just a man, nothing more. Yet here he was, wrapped in a conflict that stretched across the stars. "The child's people are powerful, but they are scattered and divided," the soldier continued. "Kaylee is the last of her kind, the last hope of her people. And now her survival depends on you. Jake's breath hitched as he tried to grasp the enormity of what he was being told. I don't know what you expect me to do. I'm not a fighter. I don't know anything about wars or star systems or— You will learn, the soldier interrupted, his tone firm. You will be trained. Your connection to Kaylee will give you abilities beyond anything you can understand right now. The mark on your chest is more than a symbol. It's a part of the Orlith legacy. With time, you will unlock the powers within you. Jake stared at the soldier, his mind still reeling. Powers? Him? He couldn't believe it. But the look in the soldier's eyes, he wasn't lying. This was real. Everything about this was real. The faction will come for you, Jake, and when they do, you must be ready. The soldier's voice was hard, almost like a command. Jake's knees felt weak. What happens if I'm not ready? Then Kaylee will die and the galaxy will fall into chaos. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Jake swallowed hard, his thoughts still swirling, trying to make sense of the impossible. But one thing was certain now. He was part of something far greater than himself, and there was no turning back. Jake stood in the center of the training room, his body tense with uncertainty. The past few hours had been a blur of new information. Alien technology, royal bloodlines, galactic empires, and a war that stretched across the stars. It all felt like a bad dream, a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Yet the truth was undeniable. He was in the middle of it now, pulled into a conflict that was much bigger than anything he could have imagined. Around him, the soldiers of the Cathar continued their training drills. They moved with fluid precision, their movements sharp and controlled. Jake watched them, feeling a mix of awe and terror. These were elite warriors, beings who had seen countless battles, who had lived through wars that Jake couldn't even fathom. And now, he was supposed to become one of them. He glanced down at his chest, where the symbol of the Orlith royal bloodline had been branded into his skin. The mark was a strange glowing sigil, an intricate design that seemed to pulse with life of its own. The soldiers had told him it was a gift, a symbol of the bond he shared with Kaylee, the alien child he had saved. But to Jake, it felt like a curse. Are you ready? The voice of the soldier who had spoken to him most often broke through his thoughts. Jake turned to find him standing a few feet away, his dark visor reflecting the dim lights of the room. Jake swallowed hard, trying to ignore the knot of fear in his stomach. He wasn't ready. How could he be? He was just a guy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the soldier's eyes, those black, piercing eyes, told him there was no turning back. I don't know if I am, Jake admitted, his voice shaky. I don't even know what's happening. How am I supposed to fight in a war I don't understand?
What can I even do?
The soldier's head tilted slightly, almost as if he were considering Jake's words. You may not know yet, but you have more power than you realize. The mark you carry, the bond you share with Kaylee, it gives you abilities that we will help you unlock. But you must be willing to accept what you are becoming. Jake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. And what am I becoming? The soldier stepped closer, his tone steady and serious. A protector. A warrior. A force capable of defending the last hope of the Orlith people. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could he say? How could he argue with a soldier who was so certain of his destiny? All Jake had wanted was to go home, to go back to his life. Back to the simplicity of being a bartender, living in a world where aliens and galactic wars were the stuff of science fiction. But now his life had been turned upside down. I didn't ask for this, Jake finally managed, his voice tight. I didn't ask to be dragged into this war. I didn't ask for any of this. The soldier's eyes softened just for a moment before he spoke again. No one ever does. But the universe is not kind to those who remain ignorant of its dangers. You have already made your choice. Now you must fight for survival. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jake's throat tightened. He could feel the weight of the soldier's words pressing down on him. He had already made his choice, whether he realized it or not. He had chosen to save Kaylee, to protect her, even at the cost of his own life. And now that choice had bound him to her and her people. But how could he fight? He was just a man. What did he have to offer in a war of alien civilizations, where the stakes were so high, where the enemies were so powerful? The soldier stepped back, motioning for Jake to follow him. Come with me. The first step of your training begins now. Jake followed, his legs feeling heavy with each step. They moved through the corridors of the Cathar facility, the soft hum of alien technology filling the air. Everything about the place was foreign to him. its sleek metallic walls, the glowing lights that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, the soldiers who moved like shadows, each one a part of a greater machine. It was like walking through a dream he couldn't escape. Finally, they reached a large training hall. In the center of the room stood a set of weapons, sleek alien weapons that gleamed under the soft light. Jake's heart raced as he looked at them. He had never held a weapon in his life. The thought of picking one up made his palms sweat. "These are your tools now," the soldier said, gesturing to the weapons. "Each one is designed to enhance your abilities. The mark you carry will allow you to wield them, to channel your energy into them. But first, you must learn to control that energy." Jake's eyes flicked between the weapons and the soldier. "Energy? What are you talking about?" The soldier raised his hand, and in an instant, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his chest. It was like a pressure building up inside him, a force he couldn't control. It was as if something deep within him was awakening, something powerful, something dangerous. "Focus," the soldier instructed. "Feel the energy within you. It is part of you now. When you connect with it, you will be able to channel it into the weapons." Jake hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then, remembering the stakes, remembering Kaylee, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He focused on the sensation in his chest, the strange energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Slowly, he extended his hand toward one of the weapons, a sleek, curved blade that hummed softly in the air. As his fingers brushed against it, he felt a surge of power shoot through his body. It was overwhelming, and for a moment he thought he might collapse from the intensity of it. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded, leaving him feeling oddly calm. The weapon in his hand flickered to life, glowing with a faint, blue light. It hummed in response to his touch, as if it had recognized him. Jake's heart raced, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with something else. A sense of purpose. "You are ready," the soldier said, his voice steady. "This is just the beginning, Jake, but now you have a weapon, and now you must learn to wield it." Jake stared at the blade in his hand, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He wasn't just a guy anymore. He was something else now. A protector, a warrior, a part of something far greater than he could ever have imagined. And there was no going back. Jake's training had been grueling. Every day the Cathar soldiers pushed him harder, forcing him to unlock powers within him that he never knew existed. The mark on his chest pulsed with energy as he learned to harness his connection to Kaylee's bloodline. At first it was disorienting, like trying to catch a fleeting dream. But now, after weeks of endless drills, he could feel the power inside him, raw and untamed. He stood in the middle of the training hall, his body slick with sweat, muscles aching from the constant exertion. The sleek, glowing blade was now a natural extension of his hand, moving with him as though it had been forged to match his movements. But today his training was different. Today they were going beyond simple drills. The leader of the Cathar soldiers, the one who had first spoken to Jake, stood across from him. His dark visor reflected the soft glow of the weapons around them, but his posture was tense, alert. Behind him the other soldiers waited, ready for whatever came next. "You are ready for the next stage," the leader's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Today you will face your first real test." Jake wiped his brow, nervous but determined. What kind of test? He had fought in simulated battles, sparred with holographic enemies, but this felt different. The air around him hummed with a strange energy, and he could tell that something dangerous was about to happen. The leader's voice dropped, low and ominous. "A mission?" Jake's stomach twisted. A mission? He wasn't ready for a mission. He had just started to understand how to control his abilities. He had barely learned how to use the weapons, let alone face real enemies. "Don't worry," the leader said, sensing Jake's hesitation. "You're not alone. The Cathar will fight with you." Jake looked around at the other soldiers. They stood silent, their expressions unreadable. These were warriors who had fought across galaxies, who had seen things Jake couldn't even imagine, and now he was expected to join them. "I know you're scared," the leader continued, his voice softer this time. "But fear is a weapon, just like the ones you wield. You will learn to use it or it will destroy you." Jake's heart thudded in his chest. He didn't have a choice, did he? He had already made his decision when he chose to protect Kaylee. And now this was the price. A dangerous journey into the unknown, facing enemies who would stop at nothing to destroy him. And her. A soft, electric hum filled the air as a holographic map of a distant planet materialized in front of them. It was a dark, barren world pocked with craters and scars from past battles. A desolate wasteland. "This is Althanar," the leader said, pointing to the map. "A planet controlled by the faction that tried to capture Kaylee. They have a stronghold there. Your mission is to infiltrate their base and gather information." Jake's eyes widened. "Infiltrate? You're sending me to one of their bases?" The leader nodded. "Yes, you and a small team of Cathar soldiers will go in. We need to know what they're planning, how they intend to use Kaylee's bloodline for their gain." Jake swallowed hard. He had barely survived the first attack from this faction, and now he was being sent to one of their strongholds? He felt a rush of doubt flood through him. "What if I fail? I'm not a soldier," Jake muttered, almost to himself. "I don't know what I'm doing." The leader locked eyes with him. "You are more than just a soldier, Jake. You are a protector. And your bond with Kaylee makes you a target, but it also makes you their greatest weapon." Jake looked down at the glowing blade in his hand. He felt its power, its energy. But it wasn't enough. He didn't feel like a warrior. He didn't feel ready. The leader stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This is your path, Jake. You can walk away, but it will only delay the inevitable. The faction will come for Kaylee. They will come for you. It's better to face them now before they have the chance to strike first." Jake took a deep breath. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. But there was no turning back. He had made a promise to protect Kaylee, to fight for her survival. And now he had to keep that promise. "Okay," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I'll do it. I'll go." The leader gave a small nod of approval. "Good, prepare yourself. We leave in 1 hour." 1 hour later, Jake stood with the Cathar soldiers in the docking bay, the air thick with anticipation. His heart was racing, his palms sweaty. They were about to board a ship that would take them to Althanar, to the heart of the enemy's stronghold. He had no idea what to expect, only that it would be dangerous. And he had no choice but to trust the soldiers beside him. The ship was sleek and deadly, designed for speed and stealth. It looked nothing like the clunky, rusted ships Jake had seen on Earth. This was a craft built for war, for survival. Jake boarded the ship with the others, and as the door sealed shut behind them, the gravity of the mission hit him full force. He was about to face real danger, real enemies who would kill him without hesitation. The leader took his place at the helm, his dark visor scanning the controls. "Once we land on Althanar, we will move quickly. We must find the information we need and leave before the faction knows we're there." Jake nodded, though his mind was spinning. What if we don't make it out? The question echoed in his thoughts, but he couldn't afford to focus on it. He had to stay focused. He had to be strong. As the ship lifted off the ground, Jake looked out the small window. The Cathar facility grew smaller and smaller, fading into the distance. There was no going back now. They were heading straight into enemy territory. And this time Jake wasn't just a bystander. He was a soldier, a protector, and whatever happened next, he would face it head on. The cold, barren surface of Althanar stretched out before them like a desolate wasteland. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, and the wind howled, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. The planet had once been home to thriving civilizations, but now it was a war-torn ghost world scarred by countless battles. It was the perfect place for the faction to hide, to build their stronghold in secrecy. Jake stood at the edge of the Cathar ship's exit ramp, his heart pounding in his chest. The air felt thin, the temperature freezing. He shivered, but it wasn't just the cold that made him feel this way. The weight of the mission was heavy on him, every step forward taking him deeper into the unknown. Behind him, the Cathar soldiers moved with silent precision, their black armor blending with the shadows as they descended onto the planet's surface. Jake wasn't sure if he was ready. The training, the power within him, it still didn't feel like enough. He was just a guy who had been thrust into a galactic conflict he didn't understand. But he had made a promise, and now he was bound to see it through. "We move quickly," the leader of the Cathar soldiers said, his voice calm but commanding. "We can't afford to waste time. The faction will have patrols, but our stealth technology should allow us to remain undetected." Jake nodded, gripping the sleek, glowing blade at his side. He had learned to wield it with a certain fluidity, but the fear still clawed at his mind. What if the faction was waiting for them? What if they were walking into a trap? The leader motioned for him to follow, and Jake fell in line with the others. As they moved through the rough terrain, the weight of his new responsibilities settled heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Kaylee. He was fighting for her people, for the survival of a bloodline that was the last hope of an ancient species. They moved in silence, using the cover of darkness and the shifting winds to stay hidden. Jake's breath came out in short bursts, each step feeling heavier than the last. But the closer they got to the stronghold, the more his nerves steadied. There was no turning back now. They were committed. The stronghold loomed in the distance, a massive structure built into the side of a mountain, its jagged edges and towering walls making it look like a fortress from a nightmare. It was a place designed to withstand any assault, its entrance heavily guarded and its defenses seemingly impenetrable. But Jake wasn't here to fight an army. He was here to gather information, to find out what the faction was planning and to stop them before it was too late. As they reached the outskirts of the stronghold, the leader gave a sharp signal. The Cathar soldiers melted into the shadows, moving with a grace that only years of training could provide. Jake hesitated for a moment, then followed them, staying close to the wall as they approached the fortified gates. The leader's voice came through his earpiece, soft and clear. "We've located their communications room. It's just inside. We need to get there undetected." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of the mission pressing on him. It was only a matter of time before the faction noticed them. They had to move quickly. The soldiers moved forward, bypassing the main entrance and finding a hidden side door. The leader gestured for Jake to follow as they slipped inside, the door closing silently behind them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The walls were lined with flickering lights and strange alien technology. The faint hum of the place was almost deafening, as if the stronghold itself was alive, pulsing with a quiet, ominous energy. Jake's pulse quickened as they moved deeper into the complex. He had no idea what they would find in the communications room. But one thing was clear. The faction's plans had to be stopped. They reached the door to the communications room, and the leader motioned for the soldiers to stay back. Jake stepped forward, his hand gripping the handle. He was about to open the door when the sound of footsteps echoed from down the hall. "Quick," the leader whispered. "Hide." Jake pressed himself against the wall, his breath catching in his throat. The Cathar soldiers melted into the shadows, their black armor making them nearly invisible in the low light. Jake felt his heart race as the footsteps grew louder, closer. He held his breath, trying to stay as still as possible. The door to the communications room creaked open, and two guards stepped inside, talking in hushed voices. Jake's eyes locked onto their weapons, long, sleek guns that looked far too deadly for comfort. He could feel the tension in the air, the quiet before the storm. As the guards turned their backs, the Cathar soldiers moved like shadows, swift and silent. In seconds, the guards were incapacitated, lying motionless on the floor. Jake's heart still hammered in his chest, but they were in. The door to the communications room was now open. Inside, the room was filled with screens, each one displaying data and images of various worlds. Jake's eyes flicked over the holograms, trying to make sense of it all. But there, on one of the screens, was the shocking truth. The faction had already begun their plans to extract the power from Kaylee's bloodline. They had developed a technology that would allow them to harness the energy within her, an energy that could be used to control entire star systems. If they succeeded, the galaxy would fall into chaos. Jake's stomach turned as he realized the gravity of the situation. They weren't just trying to capture Kaylee. They were planning to use her to conquer the galaxy. "They're closer than we thought," the leader said, his voice grim. "We need to stop them. Now." Suddenly, alarms blared, their shrill sound cutting through the quiet. The room was flooded with red light, and the sound of footsteps grew louder. The faction knew they were here. Jake's heart skipped a beat. The mission had just become a race against time. They had the information they needed, but escaping with it would be the real challenge. "Get to the ship," the leader ordered. "Now!" They bolted from the room, racing down the corridors as alarms blared around them. Jake's mind was a blur, his breath ragged, but he couldn't let up. The soldiers led the way, their precision unmatched as they fought their way through the compound. As they reached the exit, the full force of the faction soldiers was upon them. The battle for their lives was about to begin,